Welcome back. Of course, we continue with our coverage of the ANC's 55th elective conference, and the re-elected ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa will close the eventful 5-day conference at Nasrec at some point today. The party is also expected to announce its new National Executive Committee members. Let's discuss this further with political analyst David Maimela. Mr. Maimela, thank you very much for your time. A conversation between my colleague Bradan Moyane and the newly elected Treasurer General Gwen Ramokgopa just concluded at Nasrec. She was talking, of course, about the mammoth task that she has ahead of her in terms of the fact that we know that the ANC has not been able to pay its staff at Luthuli House, etc., and the fact that in 2024 there's elections, so deep pockets will be needed. What would you say would be should be the first thing she does?
Well, thanks, Mr. I think she needs to get the money because there is no political party that can run its affairs as an organization and also run for competitive elections without financial resources. So that from an organizational and administrative point of view is quite a big challenge for the ANC, especially in the last 5 years or so. So that will be the biggest issue for her.
And in terms of the re-election of the president of the ANC, do you think that his, reform agenda was basically just resuscitated, looking at the margin that he won by between himself and Zweli Mkhize, and the fact that in 2017 the margin was much smaller, and the fact that a lot of people have been analyzing that out of 7 of the top 5 have always been his supporters? Do you think that his reform agenda has been bolstered?
Well, that remains to be seen because in the last 5 years, the ANC had put together a package of policy resolutions, which they have defined as a radical socio-economic transformation. And others have argued that the past 5 years actually has not seen much of that radical turn or radical shift in terms of policy and the outcomes of those policies thereof. So, but on the other hand, others are hopeful that with greater margins, greater support, and the fact that this could be a term that the president will be leading as a second and a last term, he might lead a national executive committee and a cabinet that is more confident, more bold, and more decisive because potentially there is nothing or there are no many things to worry about in terms of staying in office or not. So you have that, but I want to add as well, Masiko, that for me, I think I always prefer to take the long-term view.
Yeah.
That the biggest challenge facing the ANC is actually not considerations for the next elections or the next national conference. The biggest question or challenge that the ANC faces is whether it has got the capacity, the will, and the dynamism to actually exist and lead an agenda for transformation for the next 100 years. I think for me, that's the biggest thing. And if you look at the current moment, the current state of the African National Congress, you can see it's got multiple existential crises.
Yeah, which they themselves actually even talk about in all their policy documents, including they acknowledge.
Yeah, whether it's ideational, identity, discipline, ideological coherence, electoral decline, and so on and so on. So it faces that, and I'm hoping that the leadership and the ideas that are going to come out of this conference actually do deal with the question of how do you best reposition and reform one of the oldest liberation movements in the continent. And I think for me, that's the biggest test that this National Executive Committee faces.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I guess also the gender parity, or rather the different age gaps that they've said in their policies would be something that would assist them. I have to take the viewer back to Nasrec very quickly. In terms of KZN politics, they are bruised one more time, another 5 years, concluding to 10, that they have been bruised in terms of making it to the top 7 of the ANC. What would be your advice? What are they doing wrong? Is it divisions within the actual KZN politics that have seen them, not achieve what they wanted to achieve?
So I'm not one of the people who are more worried about regional and or even tribal or provincial representation. I think part of the renewal and the reform agenda in the ANC should be to now begin to reconsider the reconfiguration of the party in terms of social class and social station of its membership base. Right. So in other words, you might want to consider that at least 50%, because remember, in the constitution and the strategy and tactics of the ANC, the ANC says and claims publicly that it is a multi-class organization. And a big part of its social base is actually the working class and the poor. So you might want to now begin to reconsider, right from branch to National Executive Committee level, as well as national conference. How do you make sure that at least about 50% of that base is actually working class and from those poor communities? That's one. But secondly, that the rest of the 50% is actually split with the other social strata. Doesn't matter whether they are colored, Indian, black, and so on. But you have professionals, you've got organized labor, you've got all of that. And perhaps that could be the discussion that could be taken up in the context of the reconfiguration of the alliance itself, which is actually tied to what I'm trying to say. But I think importantly, and the most disappointing or low point for me in this conference was the fact that, for the early years for the first 5 decades of the ANC has always been characterized and led by younger people. The first Secretary General of the ANC was about 30, right?
That all has changed now,
Tumanoko was about 30. But if you look at, let's hope the NEC then moves towards, the rest of the NEC moves towards that direction.
Well, that's what they're promising.
But if you look at the top, well, it was promised in the last 5 years as well.
Yeah.
Yes. But if you look at the top 7, they don't seem to be dealing with succession in those terms. That if we are to sustain, renew, and re-energize the organization, you need to have young, progressive, and your most excellent young people to the fore. And the top 7 did not actually reflect that, and I think for me it's a problem.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Maimela. Like I said a few moments ago, I have to take the viewer back live to Nasrec.